There are only a handful of monarchs left in today's world, but none is more powerful, more autocratic than Shah and Shah. It means King of Kings, the Shah of Iran. And more than anyone else, he was responsible for the 10% oil price increase that took effect this month. For Canada, that action means we're going to run up a deficit of more than $400 million on oil alone this year. But for the Shah, it means another $2 billion in the kitty. Another $2 billion that will add to the exploding economic and military power of Iran. At the palace of Darius in Persepolis 25 centuries ago, the soldiers of the Shah prepared with ritual exercise for battle. It's a regular ritual today, intentionally recalling the past glories of Persia and justifying the new ambitions of the present Shah. And if he is personally absent, his authority is always present.
I have only 2 arms, but the strength comes because what I represent to my people, if they like it or not.
On the whole, they like it. This ceremony honors the Army's Chief of Staff. And naturally, there must be an exchange of gifts. Pictures of the Shah, who to Persians is the shadow of God on earth. Tehran, the capital, is being bulldozed into modern shape. Change has come so fast that open sewers still flow alongside high-rise buildings. New cars crowd into old streets at the rate of 300 a day. Driving as a means of self-expression means an accident in the city every 6 minutes. Perhaps the urban chaos is a reflection of the country's inner turmoil as it strives to become an industrial state like France or Germany. But even the Tehran traffic will part when you go to see the Shah. Security is tight. There are 2 checkpoints to go through before you enter the grounds of Sadabad Palace. From here, the Shah often lectures Western countries. He says they and their oil companies have lived too well at his expense.
You can't keep on the way you were doing because the old way was a little exaggerated.
Do you think our inflation in the Western world is our own fault?
Not mine, anyway, because it started well before we increased the price of oil. You built your progress and your affluence at our expense. So you can't say that we increased the price of oil all of a sudden, because for 20 and some odd years, maybe 24 years, we have just been terribly exploited in a very mean way.
But weren't you a kind of partner to that exploitation when you signed the oil agreement of 1954, for instance?
Well, we had no choice. What else? We were starving, and we had to start doing something to build the country. We had no choice. They dictated to us, they decreased the posted price of oil when all the price of commodities in the world were on the increase. And they were telling us, well, take it or leave it, and we had to take it. Now, things have been put right, and the price of oil is still so low that you have not yet started to mine your coal mines and liquefy the coal and gasify the coal, or even go in a big way in the development of your nuclear energy and find any other sources of energy.
But how much does it actually cost for your country to produce oil? In Canada, it costs us a great deal because we have to get it out of the Arctic. We have so many natural barriers to it. But you're just pumping it out of the sand as you've always pumped it out.
I don't think that this is a very fair question. because you are paying more your workers, so you have the right to ask more for your oil. And furthermore, then you are blessed with other things. For instance, you can grow wheat so cheap because you don't need any irrigation. You get all the water from the skies. You don't have to spend any money on the irrigation of that when we have to do it. And that's why you and the Americans are feeding the world with your wheat. And all of a sudden, your wheat that was sold for $60 a few years ago, you sold it for $245 last year or the year before. So your question, I don't think, is fair.
What you're trying to say is that we are asking more for our commodities the same way that you are.
Yes, exactly. And why? I don't know why you think that you are superior.
Do you think that we generally suffer from that, the feeling that we are?
I think that you are, so far, maybe, but probably you will change.
Why will we change?
Because your eyes are opened. And fundamentally, you are not unjust people. You have just been living in an unjust world for so long. But you will accommodate with the new realities of the world.
Among the Shah's new realities, the F-4 Phantom jet. Each one costs nearly $5 million, and they have been arriving in Iran at the rate of about 2 a week. By the end of the decade, the IIAF, the Imperial Iranian Air Force, will be the 4th largest in the world. The Shah, with his immense buying power, is negotiating for even more sophisticated combat planes. And these days, there are hundreds of foreign salesmen in his country, eager to sell him anything he wants.
The bazaar has been the center of life here for centuries, but it's as though all of Iran had suddenly become one vast bazaar. Everyone is crowded, congested, jostling to find a place, trying to pick up some of those petrodollars.
Enticed by the Persian love song of petrodollars, businessmen from over 40 countries came to the trade fair at Tehran, a number that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. Oil has enabled the Shah to buy into Germany's steel industry, to bail out Britain with a massive loan, and to offer countries such as Canada trade deals of $1 billion or $2 billion. Naturally, this gives him considerable diplomatic clout. As it does the wife of the Shah, the Empress Farah, here leaving the Chinese pavilion at the fair. 3 years ago, she went to Peking, forged relations with that country, and has become a social force in Iran in her own right. With all the major powers, Iran is now on officially friendly terms. But the possibility of big power interference is always at the back of the Iranian mind. The Shah says it won't happen.
We won't be pushed around. We don't wish a war, but if it is imposed on us, we will not shrink.
Clearly, the Shah gets an undisguised pleasure from military display. During the Second World War, his country was easily invaded by the British and Russians, a humiliation he has never forgotten. But if the memory of those painful years is still with him, he knows invasion could not happen so easily again.
And here are some of the reasons why the Shah won't be pushed around. The Iranian armed forces growing on the wealth from oil, growing, he says, to protect that oil.
Half the world's oil flows through the Persian Gulf, and Iran is second only to Saudi Arabia in the amount of oil it exports, 6 million barrels a day. The tankers move in and out in an endless line stretching all the way to Japan or Western Europe. It's to protect this traffic that the Shah has turned the Gulf into his own private sea. At the entrance to the Gulf, the Straits of Hormuz, a tanker goes through every 12 minutes.
For the next 20, 25 years, it's absolutely vital for us because the Straits of Hormuz, which is the entrance to the Persian Gulf, is our jugular vein. We live by that. And furthermore, our forces which are there are not just for the Persian Gulf. They're just stationed there. They could serve in any direction.
To back up his warning, the Shah has assembled the biggest fleet of military hovercraft in the world. The hovercraft can sweep over the coral in the shallows of the Gulf, crossing the widest point in 25 minutes. Arab neighbors may be alarmed by the buildup, but there's nothing they can do about it. 4 years ago, the Shah's forces took control of Arab islands in the Gulf for strategic reasons. The islands have now been fortified. But who are the Shah's enemies? He discounts the once suggested possibility of an American-led invasion to maintain Western control of oil.
Nobody could invade us without being forced to crush us, because we are not going to surrender. What excuse will you have to come to these oil-producing countries? It will be barbaric, without any precedent in the world, the worst imperialistic movement that the world had ever known. How could you do that? And it's strange that it's absolutely normal for other countries to have even more arms than we have. And you start to talk about our force when you find it so obvious and normal for other countries. I can't quite make this out.
Is it perhaps that the Western countries are just not used to thinking of Iran as a major world power in any terms whatsoever, whether it's dealing about oil or whether it's talking about an army?
Yes, maybe you're right. But they will have to cope with this development soon.
Okay, the 206 is hiding in the trees and is out looking for the tanks. When he sees the tanks, he will call the Cobra, and he will come in with his rockets and shoot at the tanks. He just got one.
American advisors are helping the Iranians to form a Sky Cavalry Brigade. There are 1,500 former U.S. airmen, many of them Vietnam veterans, involved in this project alone. The Shah has ordered 700 of the latest helicopters. But clearly, there are not enough Iranians with the necessary skills to fly them and maintain them. In a country where 40% of the people are illiterate, only a fraction of the population is getting the kind of advanced education needed for these complex tasks. And as the Shah continues to demand the latest equipment, the technology gap gets wider. Nevertheless, the arms buying program goes on. Last year, half of all the U.S. weapons exported abroad went to Iran. The bill was $4 billion. The oil money has meant a visible increase in the standard of living, at least in the cities, and the thousands of new cars, average price $5,000, now take families to the mosque. In the ancient square of Isfahan, the camel and donkey of only a few years ago have given way to the Honda and Yamaha. Before the current burst of prosperity and inflation, no one had to pay for parking before praying. If there is opposition to arms buying, it won't come from the military, whom the Shah rigorously controls. As for the people, they are generally content with an autocratic rule that has brought some measure of social reform.
You're noted as a very strong authority figure in Iran, and yet you're extremely popular with the people. Somebody said to me that if there were a referendum held tomorrow, 90% of the people would vote yes for the Shah and all his policies. Why then do you need to be so authoritarian if you have this kind of popular support and warmth towards
Well,
you?
first of all, it's more than 90%. Secondly, what do you call authority? To enforce the law? To make such fantastic, drastic changes without bloodshed? If you call this authority, I don't think that my people mind that. They want it.
With his total domination in a one-party state, with a tough security force at his command, voices of dissent are reduced to whispers. There is a regimentation of thinking that labels all opponents of the regime as Marxist.
It's been said that there are some 20,000 political prisoners in Iran.
That's not true. We have about 3,000 and not more. Some people have even said that there are between 25,000 and 100,000 political prisoners.
You deny this?
Do I deny it? First of all, it's our business and not any of their business. But the truth, the reality is that we have not more than 3,000.
And how do you define political prisoner?
These Marxists.
Does torture happen in Iran?
Well, this is a question that was put to me more than once, and which I don't like at all, because it's so ridiculous that I don't have to answer that. But for the sake of this interview, I will say that we don't have to torture people. This is the way that unsophisticated organizations were doing things. We are as sophisticated as you are now.
Sophisticated in methods of interrogation.
Yes.
So that torture, fingernail pulling, people being toasted in wire mesh, which we were reading about in the English papers.
English papers. There is one paper, and I find this disgusting. And I don't really appreciate at all a serious organization like you repeating trash that you can see in one paper in one country. Why do you have even to repeat that?
It has, because it's been very widely reported, and the Sunday Times in Canada anyway is not considered to be a trashy paper.
That article was trash if you read it from the top to the bottom.
So you categorically deny that?
Yes, and I don't have to deny it because it's none of your business, but I do.
You've often said that you have never sentenced to death anyone who has attempted to kill you. How many attempts have there been?
One, but he was killed by the security people. Then the second, 5, 6 people were involved. They were all pardoned by myself. And indirectly, we know that there have been some attempts which did not materialize. And they have been also pardoned. And this has been my policy and probably will always be my policy. I forgive when anything concerns me personally. And I can't do it when it concerns the country and the state.
Are you ever afraid when you make public appearances?
Never. First of all, I'm not afraid of anything. Secondly, I know very well that I will be around as long as it has been written up there.
On the landscape of dust and desert, where more than half the people still live in poverty, the size of the Shah's ambitions take on a certain grandeur. He has no doubts that he can compress the Industrial Revolution into a few years and before the oil is exhausted, turn his country into a France or Germany. To do this, he will have to boost Iran's economic growth an incredible 1,000%. If there are doubters, no one in Iran can question the course the Shah has set. It is, he says, a revolution controlled from the top.
But when that oil runs out, in 15 years or so, the foundations of the Shah's new state had better be strong, or that power will vanish, like the power of Persepolis.
It was one of the toughest and even most bitter speeches that the Prime Minister has ever made. He first reiterated his commitment to his peace proposals that he presented to President Sadat. He said that Israel would not give up the settlements in the Sinai. We are not, he said, going to destroy the fruit of our labors. He denied that he had ever promised Mr. Sadat that the settlements would be dismantled, as the Egyptian press has claimed. President Sadat, he revealed, had promised him, during their meetings in Jerusalem, that after peace, Egyptian troops would not be stationed past the Sinai mountain passes. But once the negotiations began, the Egyptians, he said, went back on their word and demanded an Egyptian military presence in the center of the peninsula. Mr. Begin was especially piqued by the Egyptian press's description of him yesterday as a Shylock. Speaking very emotionally about Foreign Minister Kamal's demand at Lud Airport before the talks that Israel withdraw from Jerusalem, Mr. Begin said that he just landed and told us, you will have to give up Jerusalem. Jerusalem. May I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it was the most preposterous statement ever made by a guest. Imagine, I come to France and say that Paris should be divided into two. The next day I would be asked to leave France. He revealed that in the negotiations yesterday, Israel and Egypt had made progress and had come to agreement on 5 of the 7 points to be included in the Declaration of Principles. Speaking of the possibility that Mr. Sadat might have made his decision to get American pressure on Israel, Mr. Begin claimed that such pressure was inconceivable. At the end of his speech, the Prime Minister stated that he hoped that the talks will resume and that Israel would join in if the Egyptian government decides to go ahead with them. This is Jim Letterman at the Knesset in Jerusalem.
Sunday Magazine.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Menachem Begin.
The National Press Club in Washington on Thursday, the last day of Prime Minister Begin's visit to the U.S. Capitol. It was a visit that many people say marked the lowest point in American-Israeli relations in more than 20 years. Mr. Begin and President Carter were so far apart on the steps that must be taken to bring peace that no final communique could be agreed upon. Mr. Carter said Israel must withdraw from the occupied Arab lands. Mr. Begin replied that giving up territory, particularly on the west bank of the Jordan River, to the Palestinians would be national suicide.
Perhaps for citizens of a very large country, it is difficult to grasp the decisive impact that security has on our lives. In our small country, most of our civilian population lives in the narrow coastal strip 9 to 15 miles from the seashore. Dominating that coastal plain are the mountains of Judea and Samaria. Can we therefore allow or afford an enemy with his bands or forces to sit upon those mountain tops and threaten the lives of every woman and every child in Israel? There is one cardinal fact that Israel cannot ignore and which decent people must not forget. The Jewish state is the only state on earth about which a modern document has been drawn up declaring that it should be destroyed, wiped off the map. It is the people who wrote the genocidal document and perpetrated on Saturday 2 weeks ago that unspeakable atrocity, who would be on those mountains overlooking our civilian population in the coastal plain below. Who controls that range of hills may be a matter of political importance to everybody else. Respectfully, I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that to us, it is a matter of life itself.
We, the Israelis, stretch out our hand to you. It is not, as you know, a weak hand. If attacked, we shall always defend ourselves, as our fathers, the Maccabees, did, and won the day. But we do not want any clashes with you. Let us say one to another, and let it be a silent oath by both peoples of Egypt and Israel. No more wars, no more bloodshed, and no more threats. Let us not only make peace, let us also start on the road of friendship, sincere and productive cooperation. We can help each other. We can make the lives of our nations better, easier, happier. Your president said 2 days ago that he will be ready to come to Jerusalem, to our parliament, the Knesset, in order to prevent one Egyptian soldier from being wounded. It is a good statement. I have already welcomed it, and it will be a pleasure to welcome and receive you, President, with the traditional hospitality you and we have inherited from our common father, Abraham. It is in this spirit of our common belief in God, in divine providence, in right and in justice, in all the great human values which were handed down to you by the Prophet Muhammad and by our prophets. It is in this human spirit that I say to you with all my heart, Shalom. It means sulh. Sulh means shalom.
I'm just waiting for the proper invitation.
You must get something directly from Mr. Begin, not through the press.
Right.
I will, during the week, ask my friend, the American ambassador to Israel, to find out in Cairo from his colleague, the American ambassador to Egypt, whether he will be prepared to transmit a letter from me to President Sadat, inviting him formally and cordially to come to Jerusalem.